Trump just blew up trade negotiations with Canada, and it all started with a television advertisement. In a dramatic late-night social media outburst, President Donald Trump announced he's terminating all trade talks with America's northern neighbor, citing what he calls a fraudulent ad campaign featuring the voice of former President Ronald Reagan. The stakes couldn't be higher. We're talking about a trade relationship worth nearly $900 billion annually, affecting everything from your morning coffee to the car in your driveway. But this isn't just about economics. It's about power, politics, and the fundamental question of who controls the narrative around American trade policy. So what exactly happened? And why is Trump so furious about a 60-second television spot that he's willing to torpedo crucial negotiations?
Ashley, can you take us through precisely what Trump is saying tonight?
Adrian, Donald Trump declaring on social media that he's officially called off trade talks with Canada. It's over an advertisement from Ontario's government that's been playing on American networks. Ontario's premier recently launched the $75 million anti-tariff campaign using a video with the voice of former President Ronald Reagan. It's from his famous address in 1987. And in the video, Reagan is heard saying high tariffs lead to retaliation by foreign countries and trigger fierce trade wars. Trump wrote on Truth Social that the Ronald Reagan Foundation said it's fraudulently used. The foundation posted online that the ad misrepresents the president's radio address, and Ontario didn't have permission to use it. Trump also went on to write how important he says tariffs are to his country's economy and said, quote, based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated.
The immediate trigger was an advertisement rolled out earlier this month by the Canadian province of Ontario. The ad features audio excerpts from a 1987 radio address by Ronald Reagan, where the former president cautioned about the long-term economic risks of high tariffs and the threat of trade wars. Reagan, speaking as he imposed some duties on Japanese products, warned that tariffs could lead to economic disaster, a message that directly contradicts Trump's signature economic policy. Ontario's strategic placement of this advertisement in Republican areas across the United States was designed to influence Trump's key constituency against his tariff policies. Trump's reaction was swift and furious. The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake, featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs, he wrote on his social media platform.
Infuriated the president. This is an ad that the government of Ontario put out. It features Ronald Reagan talking about the potential negative impact of tariffs, and what the government of Ontario, which is one of the hearts of Canadian industry, was intending to do is to target Republican areas in the U.S. to try to kind of sway Republican voters, the key constituency for Donald Trump, to convince them that tariffs may not be the greatest thing in the world. This is obviously something that really hurt.
He claimed without evidence that the ad was designed to interfere with a pending U.S. Supreme Court case that could determine whether his sweeping global tariffs are legal. Tariffs are very important to the national security and economy of the USA. Based on their egregious behavior, all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated, Trump declared in all caps, his preferred method of digital shouting.
When are you talking about Taiwan? What did they see? Well, I'll be talking about Taiwan. Won't be going there, but I'll be talking about it. Won't be too far away. A lot of respect for Taiwan. I don't know. They cheated on a commercial. Ronald Reagan loved tariffs, and they said he didn't. And I guess it was AI or something. They cheated badly. Canada got caught cheating on a commercial. Can you believe it? Yeah. No, I don't have any plan to. We want to take care of our farmers. We have a lot to talk about with President Xi, and he has a lot to talk about with us.
But here's where it gets interesting. The man on the receiving end of Trump's wrath isn't some career politician who can be easily bullied. Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, brings a unique combination of financial expertise and unflappable temperament that makes him perhaps uniquely suited for this moment. Carney's background reads like a preparation manual for economic warfare. Born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, He's the son of teachers who instilled in him a strong sense of community and hard work. But his trajectory took him far from those humble beginnings. He graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University with a degree in economics, then earned both a master's and doctorate from Oxford University. What makes Carney particularly formidable is his real-world experience in financial crises. As governor of the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis, he guided the country through one of the most turbulent economic periods in modern history. His swift action in cutting interest rates earned widespread praise and helped ensure Canada emerged stronger than most other developed nations.
All right, good morning. Look, for months we have stressed the importance of distinguishing things we can control and things we can't control. We can't control the trade policy of the United States. We recognize that that policy has fundamentally changed from the policy in the 1980s, 1990s, 2000s. And it's a situation where the United States has tariffs against every one of their trading partners to different degrees. And it's in that context that our officials, my colleagues, have been working with their American colleagues on detailed, constructive negotiations, discussions on specific transactions, specific sectors, steel, aluminum.
In 2013, he was recruited to lead the Bank of England, becoming the first foreigner ever to hold that prestigious position. There, he stewarded the United Kingdom's economy through Brexit and the political and economic crises that followed. This isn't someone who gets rattled by pressure or intimidated by threats. Carney's rise to prime minister was itself a masterclass in political timing and economic nationalism. When longtime Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced his resignation in January after a decade in office and sharply declining approval ratings, Canada faced a moment of uncertainty. Trump had just taken office and was already threatening Canada with steep tariffs and repeatedly talking about making the country the 51st U.S. state. The Conservative Party, led by Pierre Poilievre, had been leading in polls for more than a year and seemed positioned for a crushing electoral victory. But Trump's aggressive rhetoric sparked something that hadn't been seen in Canada for decades, a resurgent nationalism that fundamentally changed the political landscape. Carney announced his candidacy for Libby, Aral party leadership, on January 16th, despite having no previous experience in elected office. His message was clear: Canada needed someone who could stand up to Trump's economic bullying. We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves, so the Americans, they should make no mistake. In trade, as in hockey, Canada will win, Carney declared, referencing his own background as a former collegiate hockey player. His victory was overwhelming, securing more than 85% of the vote in the Liberal Party leadership race. He then called a snap election and, in one of the most remarkable comebacks in Canadian political history, led the Liberals to a fourth consecutive election win. When Trudeau resigned, a Conservative victory had seemed all but assured. Instead, Canadian nationalism propelled Carney to power. Now, facing Trump's latest tantrum, Carney has demonstrated the same steady hand that served him through multiple financial crises. Rather than responding with equal fury, he's taken a measured approach that reveals his strategic thinking. Canada stands ready to resume trade talks with the United States, he stated calmly, while simultaneously announcing plans to double Canada's non-U.S. exports over the next decade. This dual strategy, diplomatic openness combined with economic diversification, represents a fundamental shift in Canadian thinking. For decades, Canada's economy has been deeply integrated with the United States, with more than 3/4 of Canadian exports going south of the border. Carney is now openly stating that this dependence has become a vulnerability that must be addressed. The U.S. has fundamentally changed its approach to trade, raising its tariffs to levels last seen during the Great Depression. Carney explained in a recent address to Canadians, the decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship between the Canadian and U.S. economies is now over. The immediate economic implications of Trump's decision are significant. Canadian goods currently face steep 35% tariffs, though many exports remain duty-free because they comply with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. However, a separate range of Canadian products faces sector-specific tariffs, including 50% levies on steel and aluminum. Canada is the top exporter of steel and aluminum to the United States, and these materials are found in everything from home appliances and food packaging to cars and auto parts. Steel accounts for about 60% of a car's weight, according to the American Iron and Steel Institute. When steel imports face stiff taxes, the price paid by U.S. manufacturers rises, leading to higher input costs for automakers who are likely to pass those costs on to consumers. Major home appliances, refrigerators, dishwashers, washing machines all rely heavily on steel, making them vulnerable to elevated prices due to tariffs. The halt in trade negotiations could keep these tariffs in place for an extended period, potentially driving up costs for American consumers across multiple sectors. But the broader implications go far beyond immediate price impacts. Trump's decision reveals the fragility of international relationships when they're subject to the whims of personal grievance. The fact that a 60-second television advertisement could trigger the termination of negotiations worth hundreds of billions of dollars demonstrates how Trump's approach to diplomacy has fundamentally altered the international system. What's particularly striking is how the advertisement that triggered Trump's fury actually became more visible because of his reaction. The Streisand effect in full display, Trump's angry response to the Ontario ad, led to it gaining much wider circulation online, ensuring that Reagan's anti-tariff message reached a much larger audience than it would have otherwise. The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation initially complained that the ad used selective audio and video and misrepresented Reagan's position. However, they also provided a link to the full, unabridged version of Reagan's 1987 speech, which actually contains even stronger language against tariffs than what was included in the Canadian ad. In that complete speech, Reagan said, "More than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports." He spent much of the address spelling out the case against tariffs, explaining how protectionist measures interfere with free commerce and ultimately hurt American workers and consumers. This historical context makes Trump's claim that Reagan loved tariffs for our country particularly problematic. Reagan, the hero of modern conservatism, was actually a strong advocate for free trade who understood that tariffs are generally counterproductive economic policy. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who authorized the advertisement, initially stood firm. "Using every tool we have, we'll never stop making the case against American tariffs on Canada," he posted when the ad first appeared. However, after a conversation with Prime Minister Carney, Ford agreed to pause the ad campaign, demonstrating the coordinated approach Canada is taking to manage this crisis. "Our intention was always to initiate a conversation about the kind of economy that Americans want to build and the impact of tariffs on workers and businesses," Ford explained, showing how even a provincial leader understands the broader economic implications better than Trump appears to. The timing of this dispute is particularly significant because it comes as the Supreme Court prepares to hear a case that could determine whether Trump has the legal authority to impose his sweeping tariffs. Trump has claimed he wants to attend the oral arguments himself, revealing just how invested he is in maintaining his tariff regime. Economists, including former Federal Reserve chairs Janet Yellen and Ben Bernanke, have sharply criticized Trump's tariffs and urged the Supreme Court to overturn them. They understand what Reagan understood, that tariffs are ultimately a tax on American consumers and businesses, not on foreign countries. Carney's response to this crisis reveals his broader strategic vision for Canada's future. Rather than simply trying to appease Trump, he's using this moment to fundamentally restructure Canada's economic relationships. His plan to double non-U.S. exports represents a dramatic shift away from dependence on the American market. "Our core mission is to build a stronger economy, one that doesn't rely on a single trade partner," Carney has explained. "This isn't just about reducing vulnerability. Lighty to Trump's unpredictable behavior, it's about positioning Canada for long-term success in a multipolar world." Carney has already announced plans to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping, with U.S. tariffs as a main talking point. This represents exactly the kind of diplomatic pivot that Trump's aggressive approach has encouraged among American allies. By treating Canada as an adversary rather than a partner, Trump is pushing one of America's closest allies toward deeper relationships with competitors like China. The contrast between the two leaders' approaches couldn't be starker. Trump governs by tantrum, making impulsive decisions based on personal grievances and then doubling down when challenged. Carney, by contrast, brings the measured approach of someone who has successfully managed multiple economic crises. This difference in temperament and expertise matters enormously in international relations. While Trump sees trade as a zero-sum game where one side must lose for the other to win, Carney understands that economic relationships are fundamentally about mutual benefit and long-term stability. The Canadian response also reveals something important about how other countries are learning to deal with Trump's erratic behavior. Rather than simply accepting whatever terms he offers, they're developing strategies for reducing their dependence on the United States altogether. This has profound implications for American economic and strategic interests. The United States benefits enormously from its position at the center of global trade networks. When Trump's behavior drives allies to seek alternative arrangements, it ultimately weakens America's long-term position. The immediate question is whether this latest breakdown in negotiations will be temporary or permanent. Trump has threatened to call off talks with Canada in the past, only to restore negotiations later. However, the personal nature of his grievance over the Reagan advertisement, combined with Carney's clear determination to diversify Canada's economic relationships, suggests this rupture may be more lasting. For American consumers, the implications are clear and immediate. The halt in negotiations means that tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and other products are likely to remain in place, continuing to drive up costs for everything from cars to home appliances. These aren't abstract economic concepts. They're real costs that will show up in household budgets across the country. The broader lesson here is about the importance of stable, predictable leadership in international relations. Economic relationships worth hundreds of billions of dollars require trust, consistency, and mutual respect. When those relationships are subject to the whims of personal grievance and social media outbursts, everyone suffers. Carney's response to this crisis has demonstrated exactly the kind of steady leadership that Canada needs in dealing with an unpredictable neighbor. Rather than escalating the conflict, he's focused on building long-term resilience and reducing vulnerability to future disruptions. As this situation continues to evolve, it's worth remembering that trade wars are ugly, ultimately about much more than economics. They're about power, respect, and the fundamental question of how nations relate to each other in an interconnected world. Trump's decision to terminate negotiations over a television advertisement reveals the poverty of his approach to international relations. By treating allies as adversaries and turning every disagreement into a personal battle, he's systematically undermining the foundations of American global leadership. Carney, by contrast, has shown how a smaller country can maintain its dignity and protect its interests even when facing pressure from a much larger neighbor. His combination of economic expertise, diplomatic skill, and quiet determination offers a model for how other American allies might respond to similar pressure. The ultimate irony is that Trump's fury over the Reagan advertisement has probably done more to spread Reagan's anti-tariff message than the original ad campaign ever could have. By turning a provincial television spot into an international incident, Trump has ensured that millions more people have heard Reagan's warning about the dangers of trade wars. As we watch this drama unfold, it's clear that we're witnessing more than just a trade dispute. We're seeing a fundamental shift in how America's closest allies view their relationship with the United States, and how they're preparing for a future that may be less dependent on American leadership and American markets. The question now is whether Trump will recognize the strategic damage his approach is causing, or whether he'll continue to prioritize personal grievances over national interests. Based on his track record, the answer seems unfortunately clear.